Good morning. It is 3:21 a.m. and in this episode, we're going to talk about something that shouldn't be political, but unfortunately has turned into a political thing. We're not going to talk about party politics. We're not going to get into the political surface level arguments at all. We're going to dive deep into the principles that support happiness, principles of freedom, of freelancing, of entrepreneurship, of capitalism, of a free market economy, and how all of those things work together for our good to promote prosperity. Welcome to the show Go Back to Bed, where we wake up way too early to discuss what really matters in life and business, and why the home should be at the center of your solar system. I'm going to bring you into a world where entrepreneurship is a way of living, not just a way to make a living. In our conversations, you will get practical advice to help you start your day with clear priorities and confidence to pursue your goals. Most importantly, you will learn how to find your voice, meaning you know what you believe, you know what you want, you know what you stand for, and you become the writer and director of your personal and professional life. Today's quote is by somebody you might recognize. It says, "We who live in free market societies believe that growth, prosperity, and ultimately human fulfillment are created from the bottom up, not the government down." Ronald Reagan. So, that's going to be the theme of today's episode. And again, we're talking about some core principles today. We are not taking sides in party politics. We're not going to be talking about Democrats and Republicans, liberals, conservatives. We are focusing on some key principles that are so important for you as an entrepreneur, as a freelancer, as somebody who is self-employed. Very important for you to understand so that you see the bigger picture of what you're a part of and the importance of how it operates so that you can continue to grow as a small business. So let's start by defining entrepreneur and what they do. So an entrepreneur is anyone who creates something that solves someone else's problem, and they offer that solution in exchange for something in return. So the solution can be a product or it can be a service, and typically you get money in exchange for that product or service, because money is our modern medium of exchange that solved a problem for societies a while ago. The problem was that if you just trade things, you might not have the thing the other person wants. So your neighbor, he wants a cow, and that's what he needs most right now. And you want somebody's help to build your house. So your neighbor, he may have the skill to build a house. And so you're like, hey, can you build my house? And in exchange, I'll give you something. And he's like, okay, well, I want a cow. I need a cow so I can, get some dairy from it or something. And then you're like, well, I don't have a cow. Then you run into a problem. And he's like, oh, okay, well, I'll just move on to somebody else then. And then you have a lot of standstills where people don't get the things they need or want because you might not have the thing that the other person wants. So good in theory, but really on a mass scale doesn't tend to work. So money became a medium of exchange where everyone wants and needs money because they can then use it to purchase whatever they need and want. And we will get into some deeper principles on money itself in a future episode. But just wanted to quickly define kind of the purpose of it and why it is an important thing, and it's an okay thing, and it's a good thing that we have money as a part of our society. So let's not think about it in a negative way. That's really important for you, especially if you're a freelancer building a small business. You have to have the right perspective towards money. You have to be okay with it and not be negative towards it, that it's not a bad thing. People can do bad things with it, and they can have a bad approach towards it and be greedy and whatever. But money itself is a very neutral thing. And ultimately, money is not the thing that causes problems. It's people that can make mistakes with it. But anyways, the solution that people offer people, it can be a new invention, it can be a process, it can be a skill, a talent, whatever. It can be education that you have packaged into something like a book or a video or a course. There's endless possibilities to what you can provide to somebody as a solution to their problem. So that's what entrepreneurs do. Now, how do entrepreneurs think? So they think for themselves, first and foremost. They have their own voice. They decide what to believe, and they tend to be nonconformists. They question everything. They don't just follow the crowd, and they're not afraid to stand out. They're not afraid to take a stand for what they believe in, even if that means being more alone or having less friends. They're willing to stand up for what they believe in and ultimately solve a problem that they notice in the world and for other people. And they're always improving. They're always in constant skill development and constantly gaining new knowledge and education, because they know that if they don't grow their business and they don't succeed. And so they are students the rest of their life. They don't see it as, oh, I go to school, I'm a student, and then I'm not a student. They're constantly improving. And they don't just see opportunity that is in front of them, but they also forecast and have some foresight into opportunities that may be down the road. And they're willing to take a risk on that foreseen possible opportunity. They're just overall willing to take risks. And they're willing to take those risks to better their own life and obtain prosperity for themselves and their family, and also to help other people. And entrepreneurs aren't afraid of money. And so that's a bit about how entrepreneurs think. And if you're a freelancer, if you're self-employed, you are an entrepreneur. Entrepreneurs aren't just people on Shark Tank that invent fun products like self-tying shoes. That's one type of entrepreneur. You are solving a problem for businesses or other people through your talent and through your skill that you're offering as a service. That is the solution to their problem. So, and you're approaching things in all those ways. Now, one thing that all entrepreneurs have in common, one thing that they all need in order to function, is the freedom to innovate. Okay? Every entrepreneur has slightly different approaches to things, has their own passions and so forth. But one thing they all need is the freedom to innovate and the freedom to decide what they want to sell and how they want to sell it and who they want to sell it to. So they need to have the freedom to start a business on whatever they want and for whomever. They need to have the freedom to make a profit so they can invest in growing that business and ultimately provide jobs for people and ultimately stimulate the economy. It is the entrepreneurs of the world that solve world problems. From Einstein to Tesla to Steve Jobs to every freelance video editor out there. You are all solving a big problem that businesses are facing. So if you're a freelancer, you're self-employed, You're just offering a service to people. So let's say that that's you right now. I don't want you to downplay what you're doing in your role, thinking, oh, well, I didn't create this life-changing invention, or, you know, I'm no I'm no Steve Jobs or anything. You, as a freelancer, solved a big problem for businesses, a big problem that was growing over the decades. And that was, one, employees were becoming increasingly expensive, partly because of all the regulations from the top down, coming back to our quote at the beginning of this episode, that employers needed to start providing this benefit, that benefit, and so forth. And two, employees, their skill sets were starting to, and maybe they were always this way, were getting more and more diluted, because it costs less to hire one 40-hour per week employee than it does to hire two 20-hour per week employees. So when you have jobs that only take 20 hours a week, they'll just hire one person and they'll have them do two jobs. But often many people are doing 3, 4, 5 or more jobs to fill that 40 hours. And so their skill set is getting more diluted, and they cannot become an expert in any one thing. And so ultimately the value they're providing is less, because they can't really hone in and become a true expert in any one thing. And so that does cause a bottleneck for businesses. And so more and more companies in the last decade or two have started to turn to freelancers and contractors to take on certain jobs that they used to hire employees to do, because they realized that they were getting better quality work and they were getting real experts on their team to do those certain things, whether it's web programming, editing a video, graphic design, and even every form of consulting and marketing positions. And I mean, literally like 75% of all the positions that they'd hire employees for, a contractor can do. And so you solved a big problem for businesses, that even if you charge more per hour, ultimately you cost less for a business. They don't have to cover half of your social security tax. They don't have to pay for all these different benefits, because you're covering that for yourself because you own your own business. And they're only paying you for the focused work that you're doing and the specific product that you're creating for them, or the specific service you're doing. And so it typically is a lot less hours. You know, they might only be paying you for 5 hours of work in a given week, and they're getting a lot more back from that than paying an employee 20 hours to do the same thing. And then also, as we saw in 2020, a lot of companies actually closed their offices. They're like, wow, we're saving a lot of money just having our employees work at home. And so contractors that have always usually worked remotely and at home help feed into that system of, wow, if we hire more people outside of our company, we can save on office expenses, and we can also have a wider pool of talent to hire from. We can hire nationally, not just locally. And so you solved a big problem. Now, so let's switch gears a little bit here. So children, they're not being taught to be entrepreneurs at all. The current public school system deliberately avoids teaching children entrepreneurship. And here's why. So first of all, what they are being taught is they're being taught a very specific career path. And it is to learn these particular basic subjects that ultimately aren't super important. There's a lot of fluff in the public school system. And then they're taught to go to college, get a degree, and ultimately work for a big corporation and become a worker for a big corporation. And many of those corporations are partnered with the government. small business is a huge threat to an ever-expanding government / big corporation partnerships. So we won't get into too many details about more of what's going on with that right now. But overall, there's a growing amount of large corporations who are partnering with the government to create certain monopolies and threaten the free market so that the government can have more control and so that it can expand its power. And it's called crony capitalism is the term that is used because it's not true capitalism, because the government is involved in partnering with these businesses and basically regulating these businesses and telling these businesses what to produce and how to produce it, and also helping to subsidize some of their costs. And their ultimate goal is to squash the competition, because then the government can control a certain industry if they do that. So anyways, in the typical school system education, you're not learning financial advice. You're not learning how to build wealth. You're not learning how to start a business. You're not learning entrepreneurship. You're not even learning all these life skills that are way more important than a lot of the subjects that we get into. You don't, unless you're going to become a chemist, you don't need to learn all these. You don't need to learn chemistry. Specialization has been knocked out of the typical school system. And there are some places and countries and various programs where kids are specializing more. And I understand that, as a kid, you need to experience different subjects to figure out what you like, but they need more of a choice in that. The problem is there's too standard of an education that just kind of focuses on some key subjects. And, I think math is really important, but they've changed how they teach it, so it's no longer effective. English, certainly super important. And we won't even get into how they're teaching history and how it's being filtered and manipulated and not being taught properly. And then, science is great. But again, kids are not being taught ultimately how to thrive outside of school. That when they're an adult, I had to learn for myself everything related to business, everything related to even personal finances and how to manage money and how to manage finances, and things related to managing a household and time management skills, communication skills. Oh my gosh. If you're going to have a class for children in K through 12, you better have a communication class. Just basic and advanced communication skills, interpersonal communication skills are so key to being able to. I had to learn all that myself. My lack of communication skills massively held me back because I never learned it. I never learned how to enhance those skills of listening and talking and being able to have true effective discussions with people. There's so many different topics that aren't being taught to children. Another reason why my wife and I homeschool, because we want our children to actually learn these things that are super important to life success. So we won't get off too much on a tangent on that, but I just wanted to explain that entrepreneurship and the things we're talking about today and true economics and so forth are really not being taught in school. So it's important that we teach this next generation and that we learn for ourselves these things. So again, small business, which includes you and me, is not what politicians tend to care about because it threatens big government. And small business needs small government. You can't have small business and big government. You just can't to thrive. And many politicians on both sides, the left and the right, don't want small businesses to thrive, even if they say they do. I'm not choosing a political side here as far as like a political party. It's just a principle here. There are people on both sides of the aisle that don't ultimately want small business to be a dominant force in the country. So by choosing to freelance, you are starting your own small business and you are helping the cause to protect our freedom to be entrepreneurs. You really are being a part of that. And you're showing people that the world of small business can be much larger than we think. It's not just about starting a mom and pop shop down the road to sell some product. The possibilities of what you can offer as a service are endless. So more and more people are starting small businesses than ever before. And I think it's a really great thing, but a lot more people ought to. So for entrepreneurs to fully function and not be limited in their ability to solve the problems they're trying to solve, they need to be living in a free market economy. So what is a free market economy? First of all, an economy, just in general, is a network of people who produce, distribute, and use goods and services. That's what an economy is. A free market economy, it is a society where people are able to decide for themselves what to sell, what to buy, how much to charge, and who to sell it to, and who to even trade with. And people must voluntarily decide to cooperate with one another, or they don't get what they want. So they can't not get along, they can't be mean to each other, or they ultimately don't get what they want. It doesn't work. They don't have the government forcing them to operate in a certain way. They don't have the government telling them what businesses to start and how to run their business. Now, in some countries around the world, the government controls the production and distribution of goods and services to the people in that country. And they set the prices, and there really isn't competition, and resources become very scarce, and nobody can really build wealth. They can't freelance, they can't start their own business, they can't be an entrepreneur. Many define that as socialism. And we just talking about the concepts here. I'm not getting into party politics. We're talking about the principles. So you need to avoid starting to attach what I'm talking about to a specific political party, because we need to be focused on the principles. When we get too caught up in the surface politics, we miss the principles, and we start to avoid learning about things that we need to learn about. So the problem with the government controlling the production and distribution of goods and services is that when there isn't competition, there isn't anything driving costs down, for one, so things stop becoming affordable. And two, there's nothing that's motivating innovation to keep creating better products and services, because there's nobody competing and you don't have the consumers regulating that. We'll get more onto that in a second. But first, I want to define capitalism. So you tend to have these polar opposites, right? You have socialism, government controlling the economy, the production of goods and services. Capitalism. So what is capitalism? Capitalism is where private ownership, instead of government ownership, where private ownership controls business and the capital within an economy. They control the means by which things are produced and distributed, goods and services. And so when you own something, you get to decide what to do with it. When you own a house, you get to decide what paint color to use, what to install. Whereas when you rent, you have to ask permission from the landlord to do certain things with that property. Freedom cannot be when you can't own property. If you cannot own property and you cannot own your own business and you cannot own things, you are not free, period, because you don't get to call the shots. You don't get to make a choice in what you do with that and how you do it. Now, there are some people that are led to believe that capitalism only makes business owners at the top rich because, they get to share in all the profits and everyone else gets squashed. And there's a lot of growing belief in some real negativity towards capitalism that has really started to, it's been in the works for many, many years, but especially recently it's just starting to really surge where people are, even kids and people in colleges and so forth, are being taught that capitalism is a bad thing. They're literally changing the definition. And they're flipping the definition to tell people that essentially capitalism is a form of slavery, that business owners are the slave owners and the slaves are all the workers. But in capitalism, everyone has the opportunity to build wealth, either by starting businesses themselves or investing or improving their skills to the point where they're able to get promoted and earn more money. And there are many companies that allow employees to have shares in the profit. I mean, what do you think a yearly bonus is? You're getting a share of the profit. Now, with capitalism, now we'll get a little bit more into some of the myths about capitalism, but I wanted to expand the definition a little bit more. That ultimately capitalism relies on competition so that the best products and services can succeed. It makes innovation possible. It allows for businesses and people to create better and better products and services so that they can compete for the consumer's money. And that the consumer will only choose the best thing. So if one entity, the government, controls the means of production of goods and services, there doesn't get to be competition, which means you end up with a crappy product, a crappy service. There's no incentive to improve it because it's the only option. So they don't have any incentive to improve it because there's no competition and freedom to allow for that. And again, that competition allows prices to be driven down to make things affordable, like a smartphone and a TV. Even those that are considered in poverty have a TV and a smartphone because the cost has been driven down through competition. It allows everyone's standard of life to be higher. It allows people to have access to things, to have a higher standard of living that they wouldn't have access to otherwise. So yeah, the rich, they get richer with capitalism, but guess what? The poor, they get richer too. Whereas when you don't have capitalism and you have the government controlling the means of production and distribution of goods and services, everyone stays poor. everyone stays under a certain ceiling. And they really cannot continue to build up their standard of living past a certain point that the government sets. In capitalism, you have the freedom to learn about how to build wealth and how to pursue that for yourself. And anybody that wants to can. And if you don't want to, you don't have to. The word freelancer has the word free in it for a reason. You are free to offer a service of your choice. You're free to set your own schedule. You're free to choose what to charge, to choose your own income. You're free to increase your income at a much faster rate. You're free from an employer telling you your tasks and your schedule and your pay and when you can take time off. And you're free from a government telling you what your job is supposed to be. You are free to be as productive as you want to be, which means you're free to earn as much money as you want to earn based on the value you're providing. Now, is there corruption in capitalism? Let's address this issue that many people bring up. Oh, but capitalism is actually a form of slavery because you have businesses that control huge segments of society. So, of course, there's corruption in capitalism, right? Because there's just corruption with people, with human beings that are not perfect. So people are corruptible. So whether they're in government, whether they're in business, they're corruptible. So let's say that a business or a business owner is corrupt and doesn't really care about helping people, and they care more about money than they do actually solving a problem. In a true free market economy, in true capitalism where the government stays out of it, these businesses do not survive. They automatically, naturally get regulated. And they do far less damage to people and to far less people than if a government is corrupt. If a government is corrupt, everyone's screwed. If one company is corrupt, only those employees get taken advantage of and the consumer who is buying those products. But guess how you regulate that? Guess how you end them? The employees quit, or other people, they don't go and get a job with that company. 2, the consumer stops buying their products or services, and then they go out of business, and then they have no power. So it's very easy to regulate businesses that are corrupt. Now, some people might argue, oh, but there's businesses that, because of how much money they have, they just keep, even though people try to sue them or try to regulate them, they just can't seem to win. I'm like, that's because the government got involved. When you have these monopolies where businesses and big industries seem to have an immense amount of influence and control, and it's very difficult to hold them accountable. It's very difficult to take them to court. And they control such a large extent of a certain industry of things that we need and want, so we can't help but go and buy their stuff. That's because the government has gotten involved. We're already at that point where the government is too involved in our economy. A true monopoly that occurs without the government's involvement is actually very rare, because at some point, somebody else will come up with a competitive product or service, and they will compete, and it will create more options for people and more freedom. Again, most monopolies are because the government partnered with those companies and got involved. So it circles back to the importance of having that free market. So the people must retain the power to themselves and their freedom in order to be able to properly regulate corruption within capitalism. Because if an employer is not treating their employees right and they're being abusive with how they're working them, then guess what? You don't go and work for them. You quit your job. That's the beauty of a true free market economy. You can go find a job somewhere else, and then that company, they stop getting valuable employees, which means they start to crumble because nobody wants to work for them because they're corrupt and abusive. It self-regulates. It completely self-regulates. And now, so what about people that need help, right? Because one of the arguments is in capitalism, how if too much money and profit is being kept into the pockets of the business owners and shareholders and whatnot, how do poor people get the help they need? Because, for anyone who's a believer in Jesus, one of the main things he taught was to help the poor and the needy, right? But he never said that the government needs to take your money and give that to the poor and needy. He said it's up to the individual to choose to have that kind of charity. And yes, of course, there are people that will not choose to give their excess to those who need help. But when the majority of people are given the opportunity, enough people will. Enough people have that type of heart that they will help those in need if their extra money is kept in their pocket. The problem is when too much of that extra money is taken in the form of excessive taxation, they no longer have any extra money to give. And then they get criticized for not giving enough, but they don't have any extra to give at this point. Now, so it's important to put more trust in humanity that enough people will be good and they will be charitable if they're given the freedom to do so. Throughout history, it has been proven that enough people do give their excess to those in need. And charity is possible. And even today, we see tons of volunteer charity type organizations that people just decided to start, and they decided to donate their time and money to helping people. There's millions and millions and millions of dollars that get donated every single year to various causes and organizations and those that need help from people that have that extra money. And so again, why is all this relevant to you as a freelancer? Being self-employed is the very foundation and beginning of choosing to take advantage of the freedom that we have in a free market economy. It really is the smallest type of business you can have, right? Where it's just you and you don't have a team or employees and you're offering a product or a service. And being a freelancer, being self-employed, you're able to have a business and run a business for very little cost. It's a very great form of getting into business because you're only offering your talents as a service. Your business expenses are your internet and your computer, and that's it. Maybe some online tools that you have to pay for to run your business. But overall, you have very low operating costs, and you're really just offering your time. And so it takes a very small investment up front to start that type of business. And so more and more people ought to do that. It's very easy to get into the world of starting a business, much more than it used to be before the internet. But the freedom to be able to do that is being threatened by people that don't want you to start a business. And they don't want you to charge whatever you want. And they don't want you to have that kind of freedom because then it takes away their ability to have control. They don't want you to be too successful. And many of them are coming from a place of control, and others are coming from a place of scarcity, believing that there isn't room for everyone to be successful. But God didn't screw up when he decided how many people are going to live on this earth. There is room for everyone. There is room for everyone to live comfortably and to be successful. And you must improve. So when you're in a free market economy, you have to improve your skills and your education in order to make more money. You're motivated to, you need to in order to survive and thrive. You have an incentive to improve yourself in order to raise your standard of living, because those go hand in hand. And when you're improving yourself, you're experiencing joy. Happiness literally cannot be obtained if you're staying still, if you're not progressing. It's really in our very DNA and our very purpose to keep improving. And so when we're not continually improving, we don't ultimately feel much joy and we're miserable. So when you're in a society that doesn't promote progression because it's not going to make any difference, you're going to get paid the same amount whether you're improving your skill set or not, then there's no incentive there, and ultimately you're miserable. And there's nothing like freelancing and entrepreneurship that motivates you to keep improving, because it literally, in such a direct way, impacts your success and how much money you're earning and whether you stay in business. You have to keep innovating your own skills. You have to keep improving your knowledge and skills so that you're offering a better and better service to your clients. And you're competing for that service with other people that are also developing their skills and knowledge. So it's a really, really great system. And you are continually improving your product, which is your service. I love knowing that I can control my income. If it's low, it's because of me, and I get to quickly get that back up. I don't have to wait for an employer or the government to decide to raise my income. I get to raise it on my own timeline, and I get to have control over that, and that's pretty cool. Your income as a self-employed individual really is impacted by the value you provide, not the time you put in, and even how hard you work, not how much you sweat, but the value you're providing. So there will be times where you feel like you're not putting in a ton of effort, but you're earning plenty of money, and it's because you gained a skill in something, so it's no longer difficult to do. And then there will be times where you feel like you're putting in a ton of effort and you're sweating a lot because you're doing something out of your comfort zone that's new and you're gaining a new skill. And that's the beauty of it. So, in summary, for freelancers to even exist, you must be part of a free market economy. You must have the freedom to choose what you want to do as a job and how to do it. And it's a win-win for everybody who is willing to put in the effort. It's not a win-win for everybody. It's a win-win for everybody who is willing to put in the effort and to improve their own skill set and knowledge. And yes, for those that have various disadvantages, either physically or mentally, in that society, those people get taken care of by the good charitable people that have extra time and have extra money to be able to devote to that. Another reason why I love being able to have a business and being able to earn more money per hour, and I only, like in previous episodes, I've talked about working 20 hours a week, is that gives me extra time to not only devote to my family, but extra time to devote to my community in charitable service, and to be able to donate more of my when you don't have enough time because you're being overworked and underpaid, you don't get to have that time to offer to society in return. So that's why, again, I envision a world where more people are self-employed, more people are working less hours and getting paid more because they're really excelling at their skill set and so forth. And ultimately, you have more money and time to donate to those in need that need a helping hand. Everyone at some point needs a boost, needs somebody to help them. So I thank you for choosing to be different, and choosing to think for yourself and to freelance despite what society tells you, that self-employment, that's just for people in between jobs, and all the criticism that you get. And it's funny too, that criticism, because what people don't realize is that everyone's job, their job only exists because one person decided to take a risk and start a business. So anybody who is critical of entrepreneurship and starting a business are insane because you wouldn't have a job. Your employee job would not exist if that entrepreneur was not willing to take huge financial risk to start the business that now you are working for. So everyone ought to have a more positive view of entrepreneurship and of business. Now, I just wanted to close one more loop regarding the charity thing. So in my own experience, we, at a point in the process of me building my own business, when I was really struggling and in $20,000 of credit card debt and could not afford to pay my bills, it got to a point where I'm like, I need some help. I need a little bit of a boost. And so we had to go to get help from family and my church. And essentially, we needed some welfare. We needed some help from the outside financially to give us a bit of a boost to get out of our stuck place. But I created a financial plan for how I was going to use that boost and ultimately turn it into a upward trajectory towards getting myself out of our financial situation. And so I had a plan in place, and whenever I would go to people for help, I would tell them my plan of how I was going to become self-reliant and how I was going to use that gift and that charity and turn it into a momentum that allowed me to ultimately provide for myself. And so that also motivated people to want to give that help to me, because they're like, oh, you got a pretty solid plan. You're not going to be reliant on my help again and again and again. You actually have a plan to get back on your own feet. And so that boost really helped. A little bit of money from those willing to help, and a little bit of food and supplies and so forth, gave us the boost we needed for me to even mentally feel more motivated and able to then take my family on an upward trajectory out of debt and into a situation where we were able to prosper by our own efforts. But we needed a helping hand to get that going. So charity is really important. But you need to trust that in a free market society, in capitalism, when it is a true capitalistic free market society, there will be enough people offering that helping hand to those in need to give them the boost they need to get on their own feet. One more thing that I forgot to mention to kind of wrap all this up. Going back to the quote from Ronald Reagan from the beginning of this episode, problems in society have to be resolved first with the individual, second with their family, then their extended family, circle of friends, neighborhood, community, city, then state, region, country. So it has to be resolved from the bottom up. When you try to go from the top down and you resolve problems through the government first and then go down, it causes more problems than it solves. It actually expands the very issue it's trying to solve. I'm not saying that the government has no role in solving any problem, but it should always start from the individual first and then go up from there. And that, again, that protects our freedoms and our rights and makes sure that those are not being trampled upon. And it allows for, ultimately, entrepreneurs to solve problems first. It allows for entrepreneurs to solve the problems of this world, which historically it is them that have solved some of the greatest problems in this world. Came down to entrepreneurs having the freedom to innovate and solve those problems. So it has to go from the bottom up. The individual up, then to the government is the last resort for solving a specific problem. So there's a lot more that we can talk about in a future episode regarding all of this. This is only the beginning of this conversation and all the many branches of this. Just like most things I talk about, the conversation is only just getting started. So hopefully this got you thinking about things maybe a little bit differently, on some concepts and principles that are super important to your success and your happiness as a freelancer and as an entrepreneur and as somebody who is a part of the small business army that is growing, that will ultimately protect our freedoms that we get to enjoy, especially in this country of the United States. And hopefully it got you thinking about some things that help you realize what you're really a part of and what you ought to be defending in order to continue to pursue your passions, being self-employed, and pursue the type of career you want. That to not take it for granted, to not take those freedoms for granted, of you being able to build a business on the things you're passionate about. So let's end this conversation for today. And if you haven't subscribed yet to the YouTube channel, make sure to do that. And on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, we're on all the podcast platforms. Make sure to subscribe there. Go to aerolite.tv to learn more, to read our blog, to check out the show notes for the podcast and get some other information on self-employment. I am Chao Grevalese, and I hope that you have a wonderful day and take the education you received this morning and apply it into your life.